am recording.
You get to the end. Oh shit, I wasn't recording.
Yeah, no, I have done that in one of the previous ones. I think we got like 5 minutes into the episode review, and I went, I didn't press the button, guys.
Like, I don't. Did you press the button?
Yeah. Okay, I have pressed the button.
Hold the string! Hold the string!
That's a good movie.
It's amazing.
Ed Wood, yeah.
Anyway, welcome everyone to Star Trek, our continuing review of Star Trek episodes as they come along. We are continuing our voyage of the pilots of Star Trek with Star Trek Enterprise's very own Broken Bow, the start of the prequel era of Star Trek and the beginning of the end of the TNG era, as it were. Describe the Berman and Braga era of Star Trek shows. And we've just finished watching Broken Bow, the four of us, and have, I think, a fair amount to say about this. Fun facts. Let's always start with the fun facts. Excuse me a second.
Is it fun?
So this is somewhat fun. It's somewhat interesting, mildly fun. James L. Conway was the director. Would you like to know some of the other things that he has directed in his long, illustrious Star Trek directing career? Started off with Justice. Also did the 37s as well. But actually, no.
Oh, I see. He's a man with pedigree. I see.
He is a man with pedigree. But actually, to be fair, there's a lot of good stuff on it. Frame of Mind. Duet, and one of your like stars, The Way of the Warrior, Little Green Men, Apocalypse Rising, and also In a Mirror Darkly. So he's had ups and downs, some good ones, some bad ones, a lot of good ones, to be fair. So James L. Conway was the director for these episodes, this two-part.
To be fair, I'm thinking of the ones you mentioned that are bad, and the direction was not the problem.
No, if anything, that scene of Wesley falling into the flower bed and nearly getting killed by the Society was actually
about this long.
Yeah.
Oh, that was Justice.
That was Justice. Yeah.
Wow, I'd completely blocked that from memory. I can see.
They'll make love at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Any hat.
And we are joined by Enterprise expert Racing Liners this week. So, Racing, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to actually be on a show when I say I'm going to be on it. Yay.
And as always, we
Racing
have...
Liners. Yeah.
No, go on.
No, continue with your intro.
No, it's fine. As always, we have Shy and Stars. That's literally all I was going to say. As we go through this.
Yeah, what will we chop meat? And also, I think you'll find the correct term is enterpriseologist. Thank you.
Yes, archer enthusiast.
Heard use.
I mean,
yes.
I did not make this hat for nothing.
No, you did not. And a fancy hat. For those that are, for podcast listeners, Racing is wearing an absolutely fantastic recreation of the hat that Archer wears as he inspects the Enterprise, the baseball cap. Guys, like
for
guys
subscribers, just to show how much of a expert Racing Liners is during the watch through that we just did, that you can watch if you're a subscriber. She would recite alongside the lines as they're being spoken.
Yes. I have seen it that often. Because, as I said in the pre-show, me and my family, we are currently rewatching Enterprise right now.
Oh, wow.
We're just on the start of Series 2, so Broken Bow was very
This is very fresh.
But
yeah.
I love it anyway. It's actually... Broken Bow and Emissary are probably my two favourite series openers for Trek. Maybe an interesting choice for some people, but I
can see it.
They're neat.
Yeah.
I think they're neat. So...
All right, Marge.
The potato of Star Trek pilots.
My first question really is, okay, so we're coming off the back of, we've had, the excellent DS9 has finished with this Dominion War arc. Voyager is home. We've got home. And now we've had this sort of very sort of upswing of 24th century, we've established the politics, sort of all the different kind of ways Starfleet is integrated in society. And now we're going all the way back, after the World War III, 2151, when this is set. Like, what were your guys' reactions when it aired, or when you first watched it, or when you first heard about Enterprise, to what you thought this series was going to be versus what it actually turned out to be?
Do you want to pick someone, or...
Racing, go on, Racing. I'll
oh, right, okay.
Speak to the... Wait, what was your first exposure to Enterprise?
Well, caveat that I was very little when Enterprise first aired. So I didn't actually watch it until I actually properly got into Star Trek as a teenager. And there was a TV channel on at the time that did Star that did Star Trek reruns, and obviously my mum would watch it a lot, and then I finally got into it, and then the first one I started paying attention to was Enterprise. I had no idea. I just went into it like blind, because the only thing I had like off the back of in terms of like my Trek knowledge was very vague memories of TNG reruns in the early 2000s on BBC Two. You know, just Captain Picard prancing around space. Although Skin and Evil is very burned into my memory.
Oh, okay, yeah. A lot of prancing in that
anyway,
episode.
so I had absolutely no I literally just had the title to go off of. And kind of like looking back on it now, I always find it quite interesting because watching all the other Treks, it didn't kind of feel achievable. Like, you know, like humanity's at peace and we all like each other and racism is gone and stuff like that. And it just felt a bit like
unless you're a Vulcan.
Unless you're a Vulcan. But then, I always say like one of the reasons why I like Enterprise is that it's the kind of bridge between where society is now and then where society is in TOS onwards. And like to me, the whole point is that they're not perfect. You know, Archer does start out as a bit of a dick. You know,
some say he never stopped.
but like you even see in this like by the end of the episode, like he kind of recognizes like I've kind of got some shit that I need to work through, and maybe Vulcans aren't terrible asshats that have been holding us back the whole time, because you know, like I think it was a case of like expectations versus reality in terms of what Starfleet at the time thought space exploration would be like, and like no, here's what it's actually like. People are going to shoot at you because they don't know you, they don't like you, they see you as a threat. You know, it's not all ooh, nebulas, moons, planets, what fun, this is lovely. It's like no, like deep space is scary shit, it's serious shit. And you know, and they all kind of grow, and it's not just the human characters, you know, Vulcans unlearn a lot of shit too. Andorians, a little bit of Tellarites, but alas, we don't see much of Tellarites, which is a shame. That, you know, they kind of get the short end of the stick in Trek, really less. So yeah, sorry, I've kind of gone on a bit of a tangent.
we are here for you. You are the Enterpriseologist.
Yeah.
So to go back to your previous point, you know, like what did I expect Enterprise to be? Like I had no idea because Trek was so new to me, and I was just like along for the ride. And you know, I loved seeing all these characters. You know, I loved seeing them all learn and, you know, A, make mistakes, and B, shit, I've made a mistake and I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to try and be a better Starfleet officer because of it. You know, obviously I do have to say the caveat, of course. Yes, Enterprise is flawed. It's not perfect. And I think there is a lot of reasons for that. Maybe we will get onto that in like later on. But yeah, I just and plus you know, the fact that we'd seen like 23rd century, 24th century, like the birth of the Federation had always been mentioned, like you know, like in like a sort of caveat, but we never really got to see it. And I think something in a franchise that is so monumentous, you know, it should have the airtime to be like, okay, here's how the Federation happened. And I really love that because you know, like as a, you know, like you see all these different species come together for various reasons and start something very cool because of it.
Okay, how about you, Stars? So I think you're in the same kind of league as Racing. Like you came, obviously you didn't watch it when it first aired. Was Enterprise?
Oh no, I did.
So you watched Enterprise as it aired. You were that.
I remember sitting down or being sat down rather to watch Broken Bow because my dad was a massive Star Trek fan. Like I think I've told a story before about on Christmas I was given a copy of the original Star Trek encyclopedia that went up to season 6 of DS9 and season 5 of Voyager. It didn't go further than that. He had like a little addendum for the season 6 of DS9 stuff, like where it's like this is all the new content that's come out. And then I got given an Enterprise phase pistol for Christmas one year. That came with a little communicator. So I remember sitting down And it was, I was like, this isn't what I remember from Star Trek. You know, this doesn't have the bald man. It doesn't have the man with the head bridges. Or that guy's got head bridges, but he's different. And I remember distinctly watching. Well, yeah, exactly. I remember watching Broken Bow. When I went through Enterprise not long ago with my boyfriend and best friend Marie, we were like, I was like, I remember this episode, I remember that episode, I don't remember this. So I must have caught a few episodes after it. At the time, I remember thinking, okay, these are all it's recognized to be the same formula. I recognize these people as being in the same lineage as someone like Picard or Worf or, Riker. But I did recognize at the time that it was very much in its infancy, that things looked different, they looked more primitive, they couldn't have the same solutions to same things. But growing up, I did not have a stronger memory of it as I do of it now, having gone through and watched it all with hindsight. And it just didn't stick in my brain as much as TNG or DS9 did. Partly because it's just a case of I didn't gel with the characters initially. They are not characters that are immediately sort of gel-ontable, I don't feel like, because they take a while to grow and come into their own. Like Trip, for example, I wouldn't say is remotely fully formed until like at least season 1 or 2. Like they're still, I remember reading about the writers. They said we hadn't quite figured out what we were doing with these characters until the end of season 1 at least. And looking back on it now, it was interesting you said the prequel era idol, because this really did even though Enterprise got cut short, and it was never really the darling of the fandom. It was always either TOS, TNG, and then eventually DS9 became the critical darling, as it were. Enterprise was always the kind of the black sheep, and then Discovery came along, and then it became the black sheep. And I feel like Enterprise has gotten a bit of a assessment as time has gone on.
I think it's because
in all of its flaws and all of its strengths.
No matter which universe you look at, whether you look at Kelvin Universe or Prime Universe, Enterprises, they're part of each canon because that's where it splits off. So whether you're transporting Admiral Archer's dog into another netherworld, it's still there. Shai, how about you? Like, if you looked at Enterprise from when you first saw it, like, what were your expectations? Like, how did you feel coming from these 24th century shows to this sort of like almost like a little bit of a departure from the norm?
Yeah, with TNG and then DS9 and Voyager, there's a sort of sameness about the production quality, right? Like the set design is very the same. You get the same acoudigrams on everything. The ship design is pretty much the same. So I really appreciated the departure from day one on Enterprise. Even with the much maligned theme song, I appreciated the break from a purely instrumental theme, and the montage is great. People can debate whether the song is worthwhile. Things were rougher, a little more rough and tumble. The ship design is very much sort of extrapolated from what you would see on NASA or Navy ships. Or like Racing mentioned, like on the International Space Station, the sort of equipment design you see in those vessels. So there was a lot, and it was this doesn't maybe aged well, but it was a lot sexier than the 23rd century, 24th century shows till then. Like they were trying to push that boundary, which I appreciated as a 20, 30 something man with a lizard brain. Like sex sold to me to a certain degree at that point, and UPN was like, let's stick people into cat suits, and it kind of worked.
Let's show people in their underwear rubbing gel on each other.
That's right. That's right.
I was going to come to the decon scene, but let's.
But yeah, just the attempt to depart from the norm. Like, it was a little more cinematic, especially like that first away mission on Rigel. It's Rigel, right? Is that the name?
Yeah, Rigel. Yeah, Rigel 10.
They actually built like a nice sizable set. You got some good action set pieces in there. Like and I think we were debating whether or not they had actually aired this in widescreen format.
Trying to figure it out,
initially, but it did have more of a cinematic feel to it. So, yeah.
I think I remember.
You idle.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember. So, like, you know, I had a couple of friends who were also Star Trek fans, and we were watching the DS9 finale, and then getting around to the Voyager finale, and then sort of kind of going, oh, this new show's coming on. This is when, like, a few of us had, I think, like, 2 of us in the village had Sky. So, like, we'd always go ahead, like, no, seriously, it was that
You
rule.
were the only Star Trek fans in the village?
Yeah, no, yes. Thank you, Daffod. So, you know, we'd end up sort of going around, someone's, like, asking someone's dad, like, can we use your Sky tonight at 9 o'clock so I can watch the new Star Trek series coming on? Like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll watch it.
You nerds.
And I remember watching it going, like, obviously you go, what the fuck was this theme song? And then you get excited because, oh, it's all CG, because it's like, oh, wow, this is the first fully computer-generated thing. And then kind of watching it thinking, like, yeah, this is an interesting idea. And I remember sort of feeling like, are they trying too hard with the kind of like, oh, this is a prequel, everything's sort of a little bit simpler? I mean, love the set design. The set design was one of the best things about it. Like, I remember looking at that and going, yeah, this looks like something that could be pre-TOS. And this is what sort of derided a lot of people about sort of Discovery and moving forward. It's like, oh, it looks too futuristic to be post-TOS or post-Enterprise. I'm like, no, but you know, Enterprise makes a lot more sense because thematically it's great. But I remember watching it, and then I think I remember watching it, stopping after, like, just before season 1 finished, and kind of going, I'm going to take a break from Trek for a few years. So I think that's kind of responsible for me stopping for a few years. But I did then pick it up later on, and then realised actually the latest series were great. But I had. When I had insomnia, I've told this story before, but for those that aren't familiar, when I had insomnia, I had a long play VHS tape with, I think it's the first 6 or 7 episodes of Enterprise. And I used to, like, and in order to try and get to sleep, I used to put that VHS. It also had, like, 6 episodes of Blackadder on it as well. So I knew if I got up to the Blackadder, I wasn't getting any sleep that night. But usually, by about the 3rd or 4th episode of Enterprise, I was sleeping. And I was out. So that used to be the one thing. So, the first sort of series, I remember very intimately. And Shai is putting on a very nice jacket. Oh, look at that.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
It's actually... Yes.
It's actually slightly... my hat.
It's slightly cold here. So I'm actually putting it on for...
Oh, let me just put on... this old thing?
Yeah.
It's just my NASA jacket.
Yeah, from when I was in space. Okay, let's go for our best and worst moments. And since this is your first time on the wheel racing, please give us your best and worst moments of Broken Bow.
Oh gosh, that's actually quite hard. Well, I know my worst is the decon chamber. Just, I hate it.
It was something, that decon chamber scene. Really, it was most honestly like, this is not a. In a non-perverted sense, I wasn't really listening to what either of them were saying because I was just in shock of like, what's going on? We're just watching people rub each other down. Like, here's a shot of Trip's at muscles. Here's a shot of DePaul's navel. Like, it's like, why? But why do you use gel in the 22nd century?
Showers exist.
Yeah. Even the Klingons can look at a piece of microchip on DNA. And anyway, sorry, not to hijack your moment, but go on.
Sorry, yeah. So that's the worst. Just put it in the bin. Don't even recycle it. Just incinerate it. You know, just get rid of it. In terms of best, oh gosh, that's hard. I mean, there are lots of. There's lots of little parts of Broken Bow that I really like. I love when you get to see the NX-01 for the first time. I love that scene where Forrest is giving his speech and the senior staff are all going onto the bridge, and you have Archer's theme playing in the background. Like, that's beautiful. I think if I really had to narrow it, I really. You know, I said this as we were watching it, like that final scene in Archer's ready room where Archer and T'Pol are speaking to us, you know, like the mission has been a success. You know, hooray, they did it. They've stopped the Klingon houses from having a big old war, and, you know, they got the better of the Suliban and all that. And, you know, but it's not that they talk about. It's the fact that Archer owns up. I said this earlier, but he's like, you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong about you. Like, you're the part of the like when he speaks to T'Pol, like he tells T'Pol, like, you're part of the reason why we were able to pull this off, and I'm very grateful because some of us could have died, and he owns up, like, yeah, I was prejudiced against you, and that wasn't right, and I need to work on that, and I have a lot of other stuff that I need to work on, but I want to better myself for the sake of, and it's probably, and I really like that from him because, as I said, like, especially like at the start of the episode, he's a dick to Paul. Like, he's saying, "Oh, I'm 2 seconds away from knocking you on your ass." It's like, shut up, Jonathan. Engage your brain cells for 2 seconds. Christ. Yeah, and like so like that is probably my favorite. But I do love all the little crew interactions because, like, like for me personally, like the reason why I watch Star Trek, it's not because I love the franchise, it's because I love the characters and the crew and just seeing them getting to work together. And so seeing them meet each other for the first time and like work with each other, you do get the kind of warm fuzzies, just like, oh, they're gonna go on their great adventure, and it's really nice. So yeah, I'd say that would be my best and worst.
Okay. Stars.
So, I have maybe an unconventional pick. My best and worst is the same scene. It is the briefing in San Francisco next in Starfleet Medical. Because I absolutely love the conversation that Saval, I think his name is Commander Williams, and like Saval, T'Pol, Phlox in the surgical room, and then Archer are having about where humanity is going to go from this point forward. Because in some ways, that is the season 5 climax of a show we never got. That is the vestiges of the original concept for Enterprise, where it was going to be season 1. We're not even going to launch the ship. It's going to take entirely on Earth.
Yeah,
it's not called Star Trek. It's just it was going to be all on Earth. It was going to be, this entire Broken Bow premise was going to be stretched out over an entire season, and they were going to be like, we need to assemble a crew, we need to get stuff how do we get the ship going?
Like, this is back when they were talking about, this isn't Star Trek series, this is just going to be called Enterprise. They were going to...
Enterprise.
I think, like, they were going to be very radical about the approach of it, I think, and probably until Rick Berman came... Oh, I think the license came along and went, no, you're making a Star Trek series, right? And they went, okay, maybe we can't do that.
It's a shame that this came out before Lost, because Lost would have solved... The Lost format would have solved all that for them. They could have launched and then flashback to assembling, the team and everything.
Exactly. It's like... I really appreciate it because, like you say, it's this glimpse at a part of the Star Trek franchise we don't get to see very often, which is life on Earth. We get that in very small glimpses, and it's Earth pre-space travel. Really, we've left the solar system maybe once or 2 or 3 times, but we've been on training wheels. We've never had our own independent ship. That's the reason why it's the NX-01. And having this conversation spurred by this random alien incursion, and then it's like, well, where is humanity going to go from there? And it's like, I like the idea of that decision being made at night in San Francisco in a surgical bay because of one random confluence of events. And Forrest, like Vaughn Armstrong, is an incredibly good performer, and he gives his all to Forrest. It's one of my favorite roles that he ever does, and like I really appreciate he puts humanity's best foot forward. And there's a reason why he's always held up as the good admiral. It's because he believes in Starfleet's mission. He's wearing a goddamn good uniform, and he sticks up for humanity in a way that is diplomatic and good. And for his sins, like Archer also does the thing. And then it leads into the worst, and that is Archer's immediate jump to threatening violence against a member of this coalition, this alliance, because it's just so boneheaded. Like, the thing I object to in Archer is I do not object to the idea of having a Starfleet captain who is flawed. Every Starfleet captain is flawed in some way. Picard is arrogant. Janeway is like emotionally isolated. Sisko has anger problems and is like a messiah. And then Archer's problem is that he's ignorant. And that's not his fault. It's because he's grown up in San Francisco all his life. He even says that as a bit of context. He's met like only Vulcans. We don't think he's ever met another alien probably until he met Phlox. And he is ignorant. And you can have that manifest in so many different ways that are interesting and that say more about the human condition. But there's something about the fact that we instantly default to, I'm going to knock you on your ass because you said something I don't like, that epitomizes everything I don't like about Archer as a character. And it almost feels like it's the worst possible introduction you can give a Starfleet captain. It's like, yeah, you technically get the introduction with Trip and with Archer, and that's a nice scene where they're inspecting the NX-01, but it's immediately overshadowed, and it hangs over his character for like 4 years. It's such a bad foot to put forward. He should have just come out with some kind of ideological point. He made the emotional point, which is valid about his father, and it's worth noting they don't have a response to that. It's like, yeah, you have like much more reduced lifespans, which is a consideration you have to take in when it's only 2 members of your alliance, right? It's an unequal relationship they've got going on here. All of that stuff is fascinating, but then you boil it down to, I'm gonna knock you on your Vulcan ass, and it just sucks. It speaks to a laziness in script writing, in my mind.
I would like to slap the writer that made that creative decision, because
exactly, like it just and then those problems just hang over Archer like a dark cloud. Every time he's making progress, he just backslides, and it isn't in a way that feels natural, like a character is growing beyond his ignorance and his stupidity and his like, I don't know shit about space travel. It feels like I need to inject conflict into the scene, so I'm gonna say something stupid. And that's a bad thing to do for Archer, because like Archer should be, by all rights, one of the most interesting captains. He's one of the first. He does not have the luxury of a handbook. But they just fall back on these like tedious writing cliches, and I'm not a massive fan of it. Shai, what about you?
Well, one quick aside. Do you know the 3 admirals' names, or the 3 Starfleet personnel's names in that episode? You've got Admiral Forrest, Admiral Williams,
there's Commander Williams, and then what is something Leonard.
Yep. Leonard's.
Because they're named for the TOS trio. Yep. So William Shatner Williams, Forrest is named for D. Forrest Kelly, and then Leonard is named for Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah. Okay, Shai.
I never knew that. That's adorable. I love that.
It's a really cute little homage. I love it. Yeah.
Shai, you need to
unmute.
That was on purpose. I'm not saying anything that makes any sense anyway. So. No, I said it before. I think my favorite moment is the sequence on Rigel, not just because the action's really well done and it's very cinematically shot, but also because it sort of, I wish they had done more of this on the show. It's world building within the boundaries of what is going to be the Federation. Like, we don't get a lot of that. They're always like, we got to get strange new worlds. We got to go where no one has gone before. Why don't we go to where we've gone and haven't really seen very much? You know, it's
go where the people are.
Right. I'd like to see more world building of the Trellian culture, and more on Vulcan, and more on Andor. And they get to that. You know, Enterprise does that better than any other series to some degree, like expanding the Federation founder cultures. But yeah, because of that, like even that little sequence where Trip doesn't understand why the mother is weaning the child off of the atmosphere on Rigel. I like that. And of course, that's tied with my other favorite scene, the decon chamber scene. But then
Racing isn't mad, she's just disappointed.
I know, it's fine. Would it be the first young person I've disappointed?
That's what Archer said.
I don't feel like Hoshi really finds her feet here. I never really liked the way they made Hoshi so sort of kind of timid and sort of pessimistic to some degree. And like I would have liked her to have more confidence, especially in her realm of what she was doing.
Bear in mind, she had
a
commission with Starfleet already. Like, she has probably had space training.
She's trained.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like Racing pointed out, she knows her regs like down to a T. Yeah. So she should be like at least have her space legs, and yet she's just constantly put in the thing of I'm the new ensign, I'm scared, skittish. Yeah.
Like, shit, we need a member of the cast that is, like has anxiety. We'll make Toshi that one. It's like, why?
Yeah. But yeah, this was, you have to really remember the context. This came out in late September of 2001, just like a few days after September 11th. And so it's somewhat prescient because obviously they shot this in the year prior to that, to those September 11th attacks. So a lot of sort of the like what you were just complaining about, Archer just approaching another culture with sort of anger and aggression actually ended up being a very interesting parallel with how America reacted to those attacks and sort of the Islamophobia attitude towards the rest of the world that they started to embrace at that time. Anyway, that's what I'll say. Those are my best and worst moments of the
I find it hard with this episode for myself to pick like a best and worst moment, because like there are bits like we were laughing in the watch along, which you can watch if you're a subscriber, that I was laughing at Clark of just his entire vocabulary range is being we're laughing that like. And I find like it's hard to...
People complain about the Discovery Klingons not speaking Klingon properly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll take all the Kalech as on the world for a blah, blah, blah. But I feel like the whole episode was kind of marred in a kind of... I can't even put a word to it. There was a film of you've watched Trek before. You know what this is all about. Like, we know what a transporter is. We know what space is. We know what Vulcans are. We know how they react. Like, if this was a brand new series going to air, if they were truly doing this as the what gone before when no man has gone before in Star Trek, this would have been approached in a slightly more mature level. But because it kind of felt like this had Brandon Braga and Rick Berman's fingers all over it, the whole episode kind of felt like this was... almost played off as like, this isn't the Star Trek this is the same formula but with a different technology in a different era that made it feel... I can't put words to it. It's really strange. Like, they talk about, here's my phase pistol, here's my communicator, here's my transporter, and here's how we're dealing with universal languages at the first point. And
what you're struggling with is... the attempt to break out of the formula while still staying rigidly adherent to the formula.
And also kind of like they're trying to call back to things that are call forwards, if you know what I mean. Like, they're saying to everyone, like, here's a phase pistol, and wink, wink, nudge, you know what this is. And there's a little bit I could have done without that in the episode as a whole. So kind of like, that's kind of my worst moment, is kind of like, instead of kind of going, like, taking a deep dive and saying, we have this new technology, let's, break it out, or even just kind of going like, we're just using the pulse pistol. Like, before, when Enterprise is just using the little pulse, like, lasers, and, like, they're using their little pulse phasers. I would have loved them to stock that out for the entire series, and then maybe, like, a Lewis Zimmerman will come along and go, we've got this new phaser, and they make a bit of an episode out of it, the same way, like, Trip does with the force field, which is actually kind of a cool moment later in the series. But
please read,
I don't know. It feels like what is kind of a common complaint with Enterprise, sort of like moving forward, is like it doesn't feel like it does anything new with the formula.
In fact, I feel like part of the problem is that it's slightly in the way that it approaches it. Because when you're talking about that kind of stuff, I think of the way that they did it in Discovery Season 2. Like, do you remember that moment when Leland taps his comm hedge and they're like, what the hell kind of communicator is that? And it's
even
so
that,
more naturalistic. No, because it's so much more naturalistic. It isn't called attention to. It is a character in universe being like, what the fuck is that? It's not the camera framing it in such a way that, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know what this is. It takes your brain a second to realize... Wait, that is weird. That is weird in the context of things. That's why that, as a prequel, like, nudge works better. Whereas everything in Enterprise is very much leaning on it. It's like, we're leaning on the transporter because we're going to make a gag about it later, being like, which is hilarious. It is like, Scott Bakula acts the hell out of that thing. But it's a case of it's a little bit too. It's mugging for the camera a little bit in terms of some of its prequel elements. Like some of its prequel elements are so well done that it's incredible, but some of them it's just like kind of mugging at the camera. I feel like. But do you have a best moment? I
do. Phlox. His first introduction to Phlox, and then moving on with the scene with him in medical bay going over his osmotic eels and everything. Like anything Phlox in this episode is just gold. Like you talk about hit the ground running with a characterization. Like I feel like they're finding their feet with everyone else except John Billingsley is just nailing Phlox straight away. Like he's got it. He's there with that.
Yeah, because I of course am an avid viewer of the Shuttlepod show with Dominic Keating and Connor Trinnet, and on one of the episodes they mention John Billingsley, the fact that he was only like every episode he would only be on set for about 2 days and he just steals it every single time, which is so accurate because I love Phlox so much. He's just like
Phlox epitomizes everything that's good about Enterprise.
Yes, because the thing is like when you see him, like he feels alien, but not in a bad way. You know, it's not like, oh, this guy's weird. You know, it's like, like he's a bit kooky, but that's just how he is.
But we love our quirky characters on Star Trek.
Is how he genuinely is.
We like our quirky characters on Star Trek. We love Phloxes. We love the Sarus. We love the Worfs. You know, we love the people that kind of show humanity back through a light in a kind of unique way that makes us laugh or think or feel emotion in some degree. And I think Phlox definitely takes the humour side of it until he gets this sort of serious side to it.
Yeah, and I do definitely agree with that.
Optimism, Captain.
And then the big CGI.
Yeah, the CGI smile. Yeah, the CGI smile. Maybe we could have done without, but it is cute.
Yeah.
So the Enterprise itself. I mean, this was. I remember thinking like, having watching Voyage. You know, we'd gone from TNG to DS9 to Voyager, and then we went to Enterprise. I mean, I remember thinking myself like, oh right, they're doing Enterprise, or channeling on the name, and oh gosh, they're inventing another Enterprise previously in the timeline. Fine, but what did you guys think of the actual design and the use of the name Enterprise as sort of a flagship design? Like, bearing in mind, I've made humorous comments to say, oh, it's an upside down Akira, blah blah blah, but actually I quite like it. But guys, what do you think of the actual ship itself and the design for sort of a pre-TOS ship?
She's beautiful. I love, like, you know, obviously we've said this during the watch through, and Shai kind of reiterated, like, the design, like, you know, like the interior design is just so fucking cool. Like it's, you know, it just, to reiterate what everyone, like, it really feels like a predecessor to the 23rd century tech. Like, you know, like you have to push a button to open the door, and you know, you have to push lots of buttons to do anything. And T'Pol has like her little like
science scope,
like science scope from TOS, which is a lovely nod. Hoshi has her earpiece, which is different from Uhura's, but like it's still that kind of like,
it's reminiscent,
you know, like it, like that, like those two are one of those cool forward things done well, because like, you know, they
don't call attention to it.
Yeah, like it, like it's just kind of there, like it, you know, like it's just part of T'Pol or Hoshi's workspace as their job as science officer and communications and linguist. Yeah, like, you know, like the feel of NX-01, it's very much this hybrid of like a naval submarine and the International Space Station, and it just looks amazing. And yeah, and and like in terms of the design of the ship as a whole, I really like it because, you know, the NX-01 is small, and, you know, it said that like they only have like 83 officers compared to the hundreds of officers that the Enterprises in the future have. And, you know, which kind of makes sense for the time. Like, this is the first Earth ship that's going to be exploring deep space. Like, you know, it's just like a small little plucky starship against the universe.
Well, apart from all those boomers that are out there.
Apart from all the boomers. Okay, boomer. Yeah, and, like, the engineering set is amazing.
Yeah,
like,
I have to give credit
you know,
for that.
like Stars said that it actually looks like an engine.
Yeah, it looks like a V8.
You know,
like this is the V8 of Starship. Like you can see the pistons pumping at the side. Trips there with the WD-40.
You've got the cool like glowing light and stuff. And oh yeah, I just like you know, like Enterprise bias aside, like the NX-01 is absolutely one of my favorite from a design point of view. She's gorgeous. She's so beautiful.
So, when it comes to the NX-01, I mean, it's valid. I think that I have one problem with the NX-01, and that is the nacelles, and it's arguably not their fault. Because you see in every moment in the intro, you get that awesome first contact where it's like, hey, look, that's the ICBM launching as the Phoenix. And then it unfolds to reveal the TOS style nacelles. And the problem is that they wanted to put a visually distinct nacelle style on the NX-01, so you've got more of that kind of LED effect with the Broussard collectors and things. But it causes this continuity problem of the Phoenix has TOS style nacelles, but then the NX-01 doesn't, so then it goes back to the TOS style ones.
How the Constitution was a throwback. They did it for the retro style.
Yeah, it was retro styling. Yeah. And that's like arguably my only problem with it, because I love that it looks skeletal. It does not have a secondary hull. It is a saucer with engines attached to it. It's more akin to the Shenzhou or a Reliant than it is to a proper Enterprise, because it doesn't have an engineering hull. Like, you have the struts, you have the all like sensor bay, or I think also the shuttle bay is like, it's like, that's it. It feels bare bones, and like that combined with that nautical feel, not just on the interior design, which has that kind of batten down the hatches feel, but also just it has an almost completely different hull design than almost any other Enterprise. It's way more industrial. Like, you look at that, it's like, yeah, no, that is plating that has been hefted in place and, like, you know, not welded. I imagine they have like some kind of space welding that they do.
Space welding,
but it's been
ISO
space welding. Yeah, the structural integrity field will take care of that. And it's like, it looks so much more industrial. Like, I've heard people complain about like the Aztecing design on like the Discovery and whatever, which I don't agree with. I think that those designs look great, but this is both not the incredible smoothness of the 1701. It's not the grayscale design of the Intrepid or the Galaxy or the Defiant. It is something of its own that stands in between them, and I really appreciate that as a visual standpoint. And it's also stuff like having the incredibly thin deflector dish that is way more reminiscent of the Cage-style deflector dish, where it looks more like just a straight-up antenna. Like, all the visual design, I think, is incredible for it. I just feel like we're going to get into this like when we pick up this more, but Enterprise's main problem is that while they do a lot to characterize the ship as being a wonderful in-between step, in terms of its capabilities, it starts to backslide into being able to raise shields. Oh no, wait, sorry. Hull plating will be
polarized. Hull plating, yeah.
You know, stuff like that is like, come on, guys, commit to the bit. Like, you have to. You've done a lot of good groundwork here. Like, as
that's
a pilot,
kind of what
I'm
I
like,
mean.
that's so cool.
Yeah, when I was saying about like the whole, it's before Trek, but they can't help themselves, but still kind of fit into that. This is why we call Enterprise part of the we've spoken about this before. Like, Enterprise is part of the TNG era or the Rick Berman era of Star Trek, because it feels so similar to Voyager and TNG and the way they handle the episodes. But Shai, please, your opinion.
At the time, I actually wasn't crazy about the design of this show. Like, it kind of felt cheap and low budget to a certain degree. It was like I also have stereo components, you know. I also have flat screen computer screens were new then, and they just seemed like they had just tacked them onto the walls. I was like, I have those. I have that at work. You're not surprising me with anything here. And the fact that they had gone with CGI, even though at the time the CGI looked pretty good, you could still sense that there was something a little off about the ship design. Yeah, but it's all really grown on me since then. This ship, it's just okay for me. Like, it's not my favorite ship
Fighting
design.
words.
I know.
I kind of, yeah.
Well, you Idol. I know you have a very defined opinions about Starship Born.
Okay, in terms of the legacy of starships of the entirety of Trek, like, okay, it's not my favourite. I think it's nice. I think what I do appreciate about it is indicative of the style of Starship as it for the time. You know, it is a hull and a couple of engines. Like, it makes sense that this would be the bare bones of Starfleet. And if you look at other starship designs around the era, like there's that weird triangle-shaped one, and then there's the Franklin, and all kind of things. They're all kind of like derivative. Yeah, they are the catalyst of what sort of would come in the future, including the Enterprise refit, which was not seen until, you know, there was I believe it was the Rick Sternbach or one of the Starship designers came up with the hull that was going to be in season 5 with an actual proper sort of TOS hull bolted onto the bottom, which we didn't actually see in canon until season 2 of Picard. If you've not watched that, there was a small model on Picard's desk where he has that Enterprise, which finally puts it into canon. Hurrah. But, you know, I appreciate it now for being sort of like the precursor to all Starship design in the future. But I think at the time I was a bit like, I wanted something a bit more exciting at the time. Like, you wanted like a new
it's also
it
reminds me of, like, you know, when they're in the motion picture and they have all those pictures of the previous Enterprises on the wall, and you've got, like, you know, the sailing ship, and then you start getting those fucking weird designs.
Oh,
right?
the
like
XV,
the one that's like
what's it called? XV115.
The XV 1000, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like a load of concentric rings, and it's like, what the hell? That's like
the 2001 Space Odyssey one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's a way more, like, you know, like visually distinct. This is a bit more of a safe pick in terms of putting it in the lineage.
I'll give the NXO one this. It flies really good.
Yeah.
Like, in the space sequences, in the battle sequences, and even when it's just at warp, it looks really good going through space. And I actually like the whole polarization, like halfway.
It's a cool idea, but I don't like the fact that it just replaces all shield dialogue percentages.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it means as well. Do they just electrify the hull? But how does that stop, like, people shooting the shit out of it? Like,
look,
well, I
can explain the science to you, Idol, but it would just take so long.
So, to put things into perspective, I don't know if they actually explain it in the show, but it is based on a real scientific principle in which you pass an electric current through metal in a certain way. You polarize it, and it does become stronger.
Okay.
Like the molecules actually adhere closer together, and it becomes more rigid and more thing. But the problem is, when you directly translate that into shield percentages, you say 50 hull plating is 50%. Do you mean that you've lost 50% of the integrity? 50% of the plating has fallen off? Like, it's not like that's a line you can get away with in season 3 when they actually start doing realistic damage mapping and it's persistent. But early on, it's just a replacement for shielding, and it's like, that's the part I disagree with.
So I think a lot of this episode as well, we've talked a lot about sort of like the overall sort of themes of Enterprise, but the original the plot points for this episode kind of revolve around a lot of sort of getting to know the characters a little bit, especially Archer, Trip, and T'Pol. A little bit more on Hoshi as well, and we kind of get something with Mayweather and Phlox, but as much as, you know, the characters will get in a pilot to go, here they are, now they're on the ship. But like the overall plot points, so we introduced to the Temporal Cold War, we're introduced to the Suliban, and including the odd Suliban renegade sect. We're introduced to this group of creatures that have been enhanced from the future, and already they have a renegade sect that we never hear from again. And sort of like, you know, the distaste for Vulcans and humans and things like that. Do we think, like, was there a little bit too much going on here? Did we find this was like too much thrown in on one pilot? Despite the fact that they ended up going episodic, we didn't seem to get much of a... It almost set out to say, like, Temporal Cold War, we're going to do this whole serialized arc, and then dropped it. Like, would we have wanted to see more of that defined in these earlier episodes, or were you more happy that it was episodic as previous Star Treks?
I mean, there is definitely a lot going on.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, it's funny, like I've watched Broken Bow many times, and it's not until you've listed all those things that I've realized, like, wow, there is a lot going on, because it is somewhat well paced. Like, you know, like I didn't feel like I'm being barraged with, here's lots of stuff, digest it very quickly. Like, to me personally, I feel like, you know, like, every pilot for, and this isn't just for Star Trek, this is for any show, like, it's a taster, you know, like, you want to have, like, all your little canapes of all your little plot points, You know? So, like, here's our human and Vulcan beef. Here's our temporal Cold War. Here's our Sunaban. Here's the Klingons that we don't really talk about much. But they're kind
and
of
the Klingons in it
just
as well.
being a bit scary. And then, like, because it's the episodic format, you know, they kind of dedicate either like an episode or chunks of episodes, or like they kind of sort of weave those little things through the series. So like I personally don't mind it. You know, because like, you know, like you kind of want to know what's coming next, and because obviously this was still the era where you would have over 20 episodes a series, not 10 to 13 the way you have now. So, you know, like you know, because you had more episodes to play with per season, you know, you could afford to have your little taster bites in the pilot and then revisit them later. Never thought I'd be using a canapé analogy.
I was going to say, that's quite a good reference for this.
That's a new one.
It's a good reference for this episode. It is like
the tasting... Valerian?
Yeah.
Are taster bites the villains from the Hellraiser series? What are taster bites? No,
that's the Cenobites. Yeah, no. No, I mean, like this is the 15-course menu of Star Trek, isn't it? You've got your Klingons, you've got your your temporal Cold War, you've got your Starfleet, you've got your Vulcans, you've got a little bit of everything just passed you in very small morsels. It doesn't quite all make sense as a set menu, but you appreciate it all the same. Sorry, carry on.
I agree with Ray saying it's assembled really well. Like this pilot's very well directed, very well paced, and very well produced. It doesn't have glaring plot holes like Caretaker, where you're like, but they have warp power and they don't have water. You know, it's everything kind of makes sense in the context of everything else. Yeah, you can quibble about the various motivations and like Archer's level of ignorance of other cultures, and but yeah, it flows really well. What was the question?
About sort of like the amount of lore stuff that's thrown at you at once. I feel like for the most part it's done quite well. I especially love the setting up of the human Vulcan conflict that will like kind of form the backbone of a lot of what is good about this show. And what feels the most fresh and the most like, oh yeah, that would be a conflict, because by the time we see it in TOS, it's like, yeah, it's an interpersonal issue, but it's never really brought up that these are two wildly disparate cultures that have to extend. You know, they aren't just like living together on a starship. They are a planetary alliance that's been going on for centuries, and that's got problems associated with it. I cannot stand the temporal Cold War for a multitude of reasons. Because here's the thing, right? It is meant to fulfill... Well, it's a prequel, so I know that the Federation... The first Starfleet ship isn't going to get blown up because we have to have a Federation type thing, where it's like, they feel the need to reassure you things can still happen, things will still have weight because things from the future might change things. It's like, well, you're not going to do that because that'll render all of TNG and Voyager and DS9 irrelevant. So already you're kind of creating a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. Like, I know that like the Federation is going to be fine. I don't really need you to try and convince me that there are stakes. I'm invested in the characters. Like, I've talked about this problem with stakes previously in terms of like other Star Trek things, but I feel like it's the most acute here, where it's like, it's not just the universe, it's like the entire show may disappear if we don't do if Crewman Daniels doesn't fix the problem with Archer, then there won't be a Federation. And it's like, well, I know that's not going to happen, so I have no investment. I immediately have no investment because I know you're not going to do it. And it's also a problem of, it has all the subtlety of a brick to the face. You literally have a shadowy figure from the future telling mysterious guys with guns to go and fuck with time.
A shadowy bastard, you mean?
Some kind of humanoid figure, some kind of shadowy bastard. And it's just so unsubtle. It's so, look, things could change. This is the big conflict. It has no restraint. And the problem is, it's like, not only do you undermine your attempt to set up stakes, but you also undermine the characters. Because, like, what I was talking about in terms of setting up, in the briefing room, this is the culmination of a 5-season, arc of we need to get the ship going. Suddenly it turns out, all of this is being affected by stuff from the future. So it's like, is this how things went in the original timeline? How different is this to what happened originally? How much of this is Archer getting help from the future? How much of this is like what else has changed? Like, what was the divergence point? How much has been altered? And suddenly it starts to affect my thought of, well, how much of this is a prequel and how much of this is you wanting to stay attached to the TNG era, but still, I don't know. It's this complicated issue where it's a lot of fluff, and it feels like a lot of justification for a prequel when you could just say, we want to do a prequel, we've not seen how the Federation was formed, just do it. Don't give me a temporal Cold War. It contributes nothing to the wider plot arc. Everything else I'm happy with, and it's introduced well and well paced, and I feel like someone who is brand new to the franchise can understand it. But the temporal Cold War is just so badly thought out.
Yeah, that's a third season thing you throw in. Like,
yeah.
You jump into a temporal Cold War like later once you've established your characters and there's some stakes.
Mm.
Maybe,
There is
and then
like,
you
it's
go,
a war.
Yeah.
Suddenly conflict. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
Like,
God,
we have enough
breakfast yet. Christ.
Yeah, we have enough naturalistic conflict between the humans and the Vulcans and the humans, between the Suliban and the other Suliban, between the humans and we've got all these factions here, and then you suddenly throw in this ill-defined faction that we have literally have no base for.
And they didn't
Until
ever.
we
have
meet
yeah.
Daniels.
Well, and then Daniels is the most generic white guy possible, and it's like, well, how am I meant to be attached to this? If you were gonna do this, it should have been way more subtle. It should have been, hey, here's Sulik. He is a Suliban. We don't know what Suliban are. These are unknown aliens to us. He's gotten a message. Oh, it's from the usual source. Like, you have to go and intercept this person. They'll be at that time. How do you know that? We just know. And then you start establishing things are going slightly awry as the series goes on. You show restraint. And then you build up, hey, someone has noticed in the far future that things are going a bit awry in the Enterprise era. And then you start, don't just throw concepts like temporal Cold War in your first 30 minutes. It's so cack-handed and without restraint. When, minus the decon scene and a few other bits and pieces, this is actually a fairly restrained show. Like, yeah, you get, like, silo explosions and a fair amount of, like, TNA, but, like, in terms of throwing all this plot at you, it handles it fairly well, apart from this one thing.
I mean, I certainly have never thought about that before. You know, the temporal Cold War stuff. To go back to Idol's first question of, you know, what you expected Enterprise to be, you know, like in a show about the founding of the Federation, you know, you certainly wouldn't expect for there to be suddenly temporal Cold War.
Yeah.
Like
Shai says, that's a season 3 thing you throw in. Absolutely. But
It's a bootstrap paradox. The Federation being caused by the fact of the Federation being caused, you know. It's a symptom of its own success.
If you're for a first sci-fi show, just don't throw people like that at people, but they're going to be scared. They will be afraid.
Leave that to the 12 Monkeys people who, you know, directed by Terry Matalas, who ended on Star Trek Picard. Oh, no, wait, it's happened again.
Yeah, I mean, you can do time travel stuff easily. Like, it's done really well in Strange New Worlds towards the end of the show. Like, it's done well in Discovery, but
Star Trek First Contact is a good time travel
Absolutely,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking
and
of
I suppose you could make the argument that it's intrinsic to the DNA, because First Contact is so important for this.
Oh, yes.
It's like you even have the Zephyr Cochrane suite, which is a really nice way of doing the handoff, right?
It's a lovely touch.
Well, they directly connect to it later in the series. Like, they literally do.
Well, that's also very cack-handed.
So, one thing I do like, if there is a little nod back to something outside of Trek here as well, is like if you want to see what the whole human Vulcan conflict would be like if they had done a year's worth of sort of before Enterprise got off of Earth, watch a show called Earth Final Conflict, which was also a pitch idea by Gene Roddenberry that was developed into a 5-series series about a group of aliens called the Talon who came to Earth and repressed the human culture from expanding too quickly, whilst also introducing their own nefarious methods. So I think that was kind of recycled from that. But I think, yeah, if they had done the whole season before, everyone would have gone, Earth Final Conflict did it first. So, yeah, which was a Roddenberry idea. It also starred Major Roddenberry. But I think it is also time for stars. I need you to give me your rating for...
Are we not going to give our best performance?
Okay, please give you your best performances. Okay, Racing, your best performance.
Ooh, I mean, Jolene Blaylock is fantastic. Not just in Broken Bird, but I think in Enterprise as a whole. She plays T'Pol so fantastically well. Like, because I think as an actor, to play someone from a species who has repressed emotions, it would be so easy to play them two-dimensional. But T'Pol is so like multifaceted. Like, she isn't just she doesn't just like monotone. I am picking up something on sensors. Like she is.
Appreciate the use of sensors there.
Sensors, yeah. Like she is just such a fascinating character, and like in the same way that we see Archer kind of like acknowledge like, oh, okay, maybe I do need to work on some personal shit if I want to be better. Like T'Pol does that as well in Broken Bow. Like she kind of sees, literally firsthand all of these humans working through this thing together, and you see like by the end of the episode, her internal monologue is probably, actually, maybe I've misjudged humans a little bit. Maybe
there's a concession, yeah.
Maybe they aren't as helpless as we've been telling them they are for the past 100 years. And I think that is a really interesting point. Builds on kind of T'Pol and Archer's Captain First Officer relationship that that really hits well in part 1 and 2 of Shockwave. Like you'd see that, because as I said, like we're watching rewatching Enterprise just now, and
check.
and I always notice that when the time you get to Shockwave, like they actually have a really good working relationship, and it's the fact that when Archer is stranded in the future with Daniels, like he says to T'Pol, like, I need you to trust me, and she does trust him. They're not second guessing each other at that point, trying to figure out what the other motivations are. Like, Archer isn't thinking, oh, was she gonna tell all this to Ambassador Saval? And T'Pol's like, God, he's such an idiot. Like they've managed to like work out. And so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that Jolene Blaylock is fantastic.
Well, it's like to cotton on to your point, like you're right that she absolutely makes a concession to Archer. It's like, I will make the request myself at the very end of the episode. And I think Idle, it was Idle or Shy was saying, well, it kind of comes out of nowhere that she's like, oh, well, maybe there is something to these humans after all. But I appreciate that that's allowed to be a mystery for a moment. She's allowed to be mysterious and unknown. It's like, what is your game here? Are you a spy, or is there something a bit more to your interest here? And as we find out in the episode like Flux, there is a genuine interest in human culture and
I felt they played that too late though. That switch from just suddenly like, I'm just here because I was ordered to suddenly I give a shit was very quick. Like that I felt they could have.
Well, that's the thing.
For what they shouldn't have spent on the Cold War, they should have put on to T'Pol assimilating to human culture a little bit.
But I mean, to be fair, like during the rest of like early season 1, like you do see more of T'Pol's kind of like adjusting to life on Enterprise and realizing that like maybe they're not so bad,
That gentleman with the southern accent is quite attractive.
That is. My personal favorite performance I'm not gonna take the easy route. I'm not gonna say Phlox. I'll leave that for one of you basic bitches. I'm gonna go ahead and say, you know what? I actually really appreciate John Fleck in this. He's the actor who plays Silverbar. He plays Silik.
You mean F. Murray Abraham, right?
Well,
he's great in Amadeus. His performance in Amadeus is really excellent. Silik's performance.
Because The Suliban would be so easy to dismiss as just like a discount X-Files villain. Like they are of the same kind of like cut from the same cloth. But he has such an interesting cadence. It's the fact that like unlike almost any other sci-fi villain or Star Trek villain, he does not default to calling Archer human because that's so easy. He goes straight to John, and he has the future knowledge angle.
That was quite cool.
And it's
Hello, John.
Like, it's like,
John.
yeah, it's the difference of like I'm gonna use another example here. In James Bond movies, for like 15 of them, you have villains who call James Bond Mr. Bond or 007 whatever, and then in GoldenEye you have your first James Bond villain who will call him James right out of the gate. And that familiarity immediately breeds a more interesting dynamic, and that does actually get picked up on in later episodes where Silik and Archer have an antagonist arc.
That's why we're like Q saying, "Oh, Jean-Luc." He doesn't go Mr. Picard or
exactly.
He says Jean-Luc, and it does feel more personal when the villain has that connection. But yeah,
precisely, and it's like it's also a degree of creepiness, and like that's the only part of the Temporal Cold War that like has any kind of bite to it, is not the idea that you're going to change things, but the idea that you know how things are going to play out and how you can use that to manipulate me is way more interesting.
Sorry, Shai, go on.
I briefly thought you were referring to Q in the James Bond franchise. I was like,
oh yeah, that's true.
Where did he call
Jean-Luc Bond?
Jean-Luc. Okay.
That would be some James Bond movie.
I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon with racing liners. Jolene Blaylock is other than her wig is perfect, perfectly doing Vulcan here. Yeah. I mean, you don't get any other than Savick and Valeris in the movies. She has nothing really strong to draw on other than Leonard Nimoy's performance and Mark Leonard's.
Walter Pring is well to a degree, but there's not very little of that. There's very little of that in her.
Yeah.
Well, T'Pring is excellent. That's true, but she actually draws a little bit from T'Pring. Come to think of it, because
maybe the standoffishness. Yeah.
Well, there's what T'Pring had, and what Jolene Blaylock really brings to it that Nimoy had was the ability to show a range of emotions underneath the seemingly emotionless logic. Like when other actors do it,
you're saying that better.
all respect to the other actors, like Saval's actor, but oftentimes when people do Vulcan, they come off as like kind of snide and condescending, and or just sort of very stentorian and
stiff.
Yeah. So Blaylock was able to bring an ease to it. So she was snide, but she was in a much more relaxed, sort of confident way. You could see the little bits of respect and emotion towards the end, like in that scene that she had towards Archer, and that's what sold the suddenness of it for me. I know you felt it was too sudden, but I think Blaylock's performance sold it. And her abs make me do sit-ups constantly. Like she's great fitness motivation. I'm like, I gotta exercise right now. And,
I need to sit in this ultraviolet room and cover myself in gel and do 20,000 push-ups.
I do that, but
I am gonna be the basic bitch and say Phlox because seriously, because
it's fair. He's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah,
like for a character we have not been introduced to ever before, within like 2 lines, you've got exactly his personality. He is a little bit cheeky. He is a little bit sort of, finding the whole thing quite amusing. Like, he has no real cares. He's just operating on this Klingon, and all of a sudden all his lungs just came out. Look, here's this Suleiman over here. Look at his eyes. Isn't it fantastic? Like, he's just very like...
I've never operated on a live one before.
Exactly. I just joined this starship. He's like sort of like the person who just had a few too many drinks and just all of a sudden just found himself on various places. Like, I'm just on this starship now. I'm the mechanic. I have this cage of bats. I must feed them something. Let's put this eel on you. Fuck it. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And for John Billingsley to sort of like all of a sudden like bring this kind of affluent character that sort of in so much in love with what he does, and also has a little bit of depth to him as well, because you have a little bit of seriousness when sort of he's leading Hoshi on a little bit and she's trying to translate for the Klingon. He's like, yes, I know the problem here, let's just put this on here. He's talking absolute bollocks. Nothing wrong with you, my dear. It shows depth, and I give full credit to John Billingsley for being able to sell the performance, because they could have easily hired someone that wasn't as good and it came out bad. I think there was absolutely perfect
There's a degree
casting.
of charisma needed for it.
Absolutely, and the fact that John Billingsley himself, as like you said in the Shuttle Pod 1 podcast, was kind of unsure on the character as well. Like he thought it was a kind of bird person, didn't he? Like at the table read, he was trying to squawk. I was like, "Am I doing this?" Yeah. Kind of speaks volumes to how they adapted the character. But okay, Stars, give us your rating, please. What are we rating this out of?
All right, how many monochromatic strippers with elongated tongues eating butterflies out of 10 would you like to give this episode?
I give it 10. I'll give it 10. I'll take as many as possible.
All right, Reed.
That's a bit gutsy.
Start racing, please. Your elongated tongues out of 10.
17 or 1 out of 10. No. Yes, I am a very biased Enterprise fan, and it is one of my favorite treks, and I adore it, and I recognize that, yes, it has many flaws. Yes, it didn't find its feet until series 3 and 4, but solid 9 out of 10.
Ooh.
8.75 to 9 out of 10. Yeah, I love it.
Stars.
For me, I think Racing said it best when she said that out of all the pilots, in terms of translating what the series Bible, what the series pitch is about from script to screen, Emissary and this do it easily the best. Like, it doesn't have any of the logical problems of Caretaker. It doesn't have any of the we're sorting out, we're in a different century, we have no idea what the fuck. You don't want to know what the writer's room looks like of TNG. You don't have any of the stiltedness or the, early installment weirdness or, over the cage. It just is immediately fully formed as essentially what is going to be going forward. Like, things will change, like characters will change and writing will refine and arcs will come and go. But essentially what this is Enterprise from the word go. And while you do have stuff like the decon scene and some of the script writing trips, which I mentioned before, that drag it down, it has a through line that makes sense. It introduces you to the world. The characters make sense. And it just works. The pacing holds it all together. There's obvious stakes here that are established. There's a bit of visual flair. You get a bit of action. You get a little bit of pontificating about society and culture and space exploration. Like, it just kind of hits on all the points that you want. Like, if you want to sell Star Trek to someone, either this or Emissary, I feel like are best at translating what the show is essentially trying to be about. So I'd give this an 8 out of 10 monochromatic alien strippers with elongated tongues eating butterflies out of 10.
Shy.
Yeah, I also give it an 8 out of 10. This is a really solid pilot. It's really well shot. It's really you were even commenting on like the weird Mannheim effect, special effect. They do a special effect with the camera moving, and that's
pretty good.
In 2001. That's a tough visual effect. So it's really solid. I don't know if the entire series lives up to the promise. Certainly the first season doesn't live up to the promise of this. Second and third and fourth seasons start to pick up pretty well. And I like a lot of the later season arcs that happen. But this pilot's really good. Yeah. So
how about you, Idle?
10. I'll save the last two for myself.
I'm debating between a 7. I'm debating between a 7 or an 8 because, like, The things that put me off are Archer's attitude, the sun, like I said, the sun turned shiftward to pole, the whole temporal war sort of tease, and the whole sort of multitude of everything thrown in. The veneer of this is sort of like we're getting a bit tired of the TNG formula, and like this sort of feels a little bit like Brannon Braga and Rick Berman sort of attempts to keep things going in an era that is starting to change in television. I think I've got to go 7. I think I agree with a lot of you. Like this does feel like a good introduction to a series that could be. Like this is, overlooking Archer's sort of eager tenacity. The characters were introduced well. There was a lot of promise for Mayweather and Hoshi that never develops. But as of this episode, we were like, yeah, this is cool. I love Trip. Trip's one of my favorite characters in all of Trek.
I feel like we have to give credit to Connor Trinnick because, I feel like Scott Bakula does the best we can because I don't feel like Archer was ever quite a character he could quite inhabit. Because it's not quite playing to his strengths. Jolene Blalock is flawless. I will not hear a word against her. Donna Keaton does the best he can with what little Reed is given. Whenever he gets something, he does it great. John Billingsley is a revelation. But Connor Trinnier, they have to refine what is going on with Trip a little bit because he's a little bit more abrasive here than he is for the rest of the season. Of the rest of the show, rather. But he's still great. Stuff like his interplay with Clang. Yeah, no, that scene is hilarious. I kind of wish that they had drilled down more on Reed and Trip because that's an amazing friendship.
Yeah.
But also just
my beloved.
Exactly. And I love his the energy he gives to Clang when it's like, I don't predict the way you smell either.
Yeah. That's a good moment.
He sells it so well, and it's I have to give credit to him. I love Connor Trinnier, and he's never given a bad performance in all of Trek. I love him.
So I think
Can I?
Go on.
I was gonna. I don't want to finish your thought, and then I want to ask a postscript question about.
Okay. No, I think I'll settle for a 7. I think there are things they could have done better with the not necessarily the pacing. I think the pacing was fine. I would have liked little plot points like the female Suliban. That whole sort of plot point didn't really serve to go anywhere other than sort of divert them to Rigel to kind of explore a new space. But
did you need a decon gel scene with the female?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
She was acting sultry enough, so
why not? Yeah, that was it. The point. Yeah, that was another thing. The point is I need physical contact to assess if I trust someone, and her kissing Archer is just
Rick Berman.
No, come on, you didn't need to do that.
Yeah, everyone scores for this rise up to by 1 point fully if you take the Rick Bermanisms out of this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would have been maybe an 8 or a 9 for me, but I think a 7, which is still very good. I still enjoy this episode for what it is quite a lot. But yeah, go on, Shai.
My postscript question: is Scott Bakula the right actor for this role?
Ooh.
I don't know.
This is debated a lot. People debate this a lot.
Yeah.
See, I would say yes, because the caveat is, look at who he becomes in Series 4. Series 4 Archer is, I don't mind it. You do get to see, throughout the series, his growth and his change and his kind of outlook, especially post Sydney War. The first episode, of Series 4 when he's speaking to Captain Hernandez and he's like,
I was thinking about that scene.
He's expressing his concerns, I think I've changed, I wanted to be an explorer and now I'm a soldier.
I think I lost something out there.
Yeah.
And then he sleeps with her on a mountain.
Sorry.
I
Thanks,
think Berman.
the issue, and I discuss this with friends who are Enterprise fans a lot. I think with Archer, it's not necessarily the casting, because I do genuinely think there is episodes where Scott Bakula does a really good job. It's more the fact that he was very inconsistently written, to echo back to your point, Stars, he would make a few steps forward and then he'd kind of stumble back a bit. Because in the same way that the writers were trying to figure out who Trip was, I think they were trying to figure out who Archer was. And when you are having your captain, your lead, you kind of need to know who your lead and your captain is. Because, you know, and it's like in terms of Scott Bakula's capability to carry the show, yeah, he does that really well. For me personally, yeah, I just think it's less with Archer, it's less the issue of casting and more of the inconsistent writing. And also, you know, we've all mentioned like the flaws of Enterprise. Like, you know, a lot of the issue with Enterprise is because it is the Trek series that Rick Berman had the most involvement in, and a lot of the times it shows. Like, you know, not just from a production perspective, because like he actually wrote a lot of episodes as well, and
he was credited on this episode, in fact. Yeah,
you can tell. There's lots of moments where you can tell that Rick Berman just put his big old massive sweaty hand right on the script, and it's like, for God's sake, just because to hark back to my point about series 4, because that's when Manny Koto took over as showrunner, and the difference, you know, the fact that you have all these like little mini arcs, and like, you know, like to me, like I always say, like series 4 of Enterprise is what Enterprise should have been.
Absolutely.
You know, because it explores stuff with the Vulcans. We had the whole Kirshara arc, which is absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite arcs in Star Trek ever.
Yeah, agreed.
And like you know, and it's the fact that like you know, like Broken Bow Archer would not have done the stuff that Kirshara, you know, like they are different Archers completely. Like, you know, Archer wouldn't have, you know, Broken Bow Archer wouldn't have gone to the extent that he did if the Kirshara stuff happened in series 1. You know, he wouldn't have given much of a toss. You know, even if it, you know, like maybe he would only start caring like when he, you know, like when it's found out that T'Pol's mother's involved. You know, it's the fact that, you know, in the Kishar, he is concerned from the word go about what is happening on Vulcan. And, you know, and the fact that one of his dearest friends, Admiral Forrest, died is, oh, God.
Spoilers.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, Forrest. Right.
So, Broken Bow.
Sorry.
Funnily enough,
so good.
Funnily enough, did you know that the original name for Archer was going to be Jackson? He was going to be Jackson Archer, but anyway.
Jackson?
Yeah.
Don't think it would have fit him. Don't think it would fit. Yeah, Jonathan works.
Yeah. Right, so to basically try and summarize myself to answer Shai's point, yes, Bakula was the right choice. Inconsistent writing was the issue, not necessarily the casting.
For me, Scott Bakula, I think, is a very talented actor. I think he is very good at acting. I think he is very good, especially at conveying warmth and companionship and understanding. And that is why he is not necessarily always a good fit for Archer, because Archer is a character who is essentially carrying around a good amount of pain with him at almost any time. He is carrying around the pain of losing his father before he got to see his dream fulfilled. He is carrying around the expectations of an entire planet. He is carrying around the guilt of everything that happened in The Expanse. He is carrying around the relationship, the responsibility of like 83 lives, a lot of which get lost. And the problem with Scott Bakula is that I feel like he's a great companionable actor, but I don't ever... Like, when I think of some of his more emotionally resonant scenes, when I think of his speech to the Vulcans and the Tellarites and the Andorians about exploring the final frontier together, or when I think about, I think I've lost something out in The Expanse because of what he was forced to do, I don't ever think, wow, Scott Bakula brought something really amazing to that scene. I think that is a well-written scene and Scott Bakula acted it well. I don't ever find myself emotionally connecting to him in the same way that I do with Picard when he has the breakdown in Family, or to Janeway when she is absolutely betrayed by Cash's counterpoint, or when like Sisko is like kind of losing touch with reality in Rapture. I genuinely believe that Avery Brooks is in that moment. Whereas Scott Bakula, there's always a feeling of disconnect. And I don't feel like it's his fault. I feel like it's a case of the character and the actor just do not always, like, there's always like a kind of a sliding overlay of tracing paper, right? And like every now and then it slips from like 70% to 90%, but it's never 100%. I never 100% buy him as the first captain in Starfleet.
I think I have the same
and I
concerns,
don't blame him for it. And it's like I feel like it's not a case of he lacks emotional conviction. I just feel like he is asked of some. I don't know. It's just this weird thing where I feel like a different actor would bring more to it, but he is still a perfectly good actor. I just don't feel like he's a good fit for it. Like I think Scott Bakula is a very talented guy. It's just something is just not quite there. And that's you know what? I'll be nebulous. I'll be the TV reviewer critic. He's missing that captain quality, quote unquote. Ooh. You know that je ne sais quoi. Listen, you know that I can't say what.
Racing's never coming back on again after this. You know, we've been sitting there just trashing it over everything.
Bridges,
yeah. Homer Simpson.
Server.
Sorry.
What do you think, Idol? What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same stuff that Stars said. Like, I felt like there was something. He didn't feel like he almost didn't want to be in the role, or there was a little bit like, he obviously wanted to be in the role because he was being paid for it and he was acting his heart out for it, but there was almost like a level of Scott Bakula to Archer that was sort of like missing that connection between the two. But yeah, I think like he never had his inspirational moment the same way Picard or Sisko or Janeway did. Like, he never had his moment where we stood out in front, he stood out in front of people and sort of had his inspirational speech, or he did his service for, like, sacrifice for the ship, or like in a meaningful way. And at the same time, he didn't really have his light-hearted moments, or as many of them either. He had his little nods and his winks to Trip here and there, but he never had his.
He's a very good comedic actor. He doesn't get to do that very often.
Yeah, he never had his standing in front of the Admiral going, "I'm something of a role model," or sitting there building a clock going, "A clock!" The way the Sisko did. It never really sort of had his humorous moments to go the other side. He was sort of very one note. He is Captain Archer. This is what you're going to get. Deal with it. Which is kind of
what it is.
Yeah,
he's allowed to make serious mistakes, but he's not allowed to be goofy. I feel like it's part of the problem with his writing. I can't think of any goofy Archer moments, and I feel like
apart from maybe the chainsaw when he's wearing the dress thing, that was probably about as close as he got.
Yeah, but even then, it's like the situational comedy of it. It's not really like he has like part of the fun of Picard is his own awkwardness. That is self-manufactured. Picard is just like that, whereas like Archer, I never felt that anything was goofy because of him.
Archer needed a Loaxana Troy. Like, he needed someone that made him feel uncomfortable the same way that Picard did, because that was the best parallel.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Guess
they did,
what?
but they killed her off in the pilot.
No, you know what? Here's the problem, right? Jonathan Archer and Scott Bakula are at their best when he is playing opposite Jeffrey Combs and Shran. Their relationship makes me believe in Archer. It is something about their chemistry that is that missing. Like, guess what? If you gave me Broken Bow, but Shran was just built into the show as an impartial observer, part of the in turning the trio into a quadrilogy, so that you have like Shran, Archer, Trip, and T'Pol as your quadrio. Like, sorry, Dora, you'll have to wait for you. Like, I feel like
like instead of the temporal Cold War, you have the Andorians sort of watching what's going on
immediately, straight up, and suddenly, because there's something about Jeffrey Combs that makes Scott Bakula just throw himself into it. There is something about that. It's like on Quantum Leap, where it's like Dean Stockwell, like their chemistry is it's incalculable how good the chemistry is, and Jeffrey Combs brings something out in Scott Bakula that is incredibly compelling, and that is what I feel is missing from Archer, and why it works so well whenever Shran turns up. There's just something about him that challenges Bakula, and that I feel like it's almost like Bakula is finding the role too easy, like he's not being asked enough of him, and he's not being asked to stretch himself sometimes. And it's like when he's asked to, he can do pretty damn well. It's just maybe that's part of the problem.
I agree with Racing and both of you in a strange way. I think he's the right actor but I think the writers weren't writing for it. They weren't writing for Scott Bakula. They were writing the character that appeared on the page in the pilot. And for the rest of the series, they just kept writing that like character breakdown for the rest of the series. Like the best sort of like lightest moment that we were talking about, I don't know if we mentioned it in this review or during the watch through, was when he gets transported from the ship. That's the first time like a human has been, and he's just grasping at himself, wondering like if he's all there. It's a great little quiet moment, but it's sort of the first bit of lightness that we see out of Archer. Scott Bakula's tremendously
out of it.
Bakula's like, he's a Broadway performer. They never had him sing or dance on the show. I don't understand that. Like on TNG, like they wrote to what they knew Patrick Stewart could do. He was a Shakespearean actor. He had done generals. He had done kings. So they wrote him like that. But then once they started to realize, oh, Patrick Stewart's funny, they started to write Jean-Luc Picard with some little
when he's in the bar, when he's in the impersonator Picard, when they sing along with everyone in the bar and he's sort of reveling in it and like making everyone feel slightly awkward. Like that was somehow. Anyway, and, Broken Bow.
Well, no, this is what we're talking about.
We do. Yeah,
you can see part of the problems with like what they set out to do versus what they actually did, which I think
the Enterprise. The Enterprise writers, I don't think, fully understood the ingredients that they had. Either not just with Bakula, but also with like Anthony Montgomery, Dominic Keating. I don't think they understood
with Linda Park as well. Like they all talent performers in that way.
Underused and disrespected.
Absolutely,
yeah. Too right.
And that's kind of Rick Berman's fault. So
absolutely.
Okay. So that's our review of Broken Bow and most of Enterprise as well, I think.
We got
a lot to say.
Guess what?
Yeah.
There is a lot to talk about with Enterprise. Because here's the thing, right? When Enterprise fails, it at least does so in a way that I find interesting and can talk about and analyze why it goes wrong. When something like Voyager, for example, turns out a shitty episode, it's often just a case of like, this script is just stupid, or that actor was just wrong, or something. It's like very easy to point out. But whereas like Enterprise, someone is at least trying. Someone is always giving 100%. It just doesn't always focus in the right way, and that's more interesting to talk about in a way.
You're suggesting there's not an alien planet in the Delta Quadrant that is just made up of a Greek chorus?
I love that episode, sorry.
Yeah, I know you do.
Alright. Racing, thank you so much for joining us this episode. Will you come back and watch some more?
Thank you so much for having me.
Will you come back and watch some more Enterprise with us?
Hell yeah.
There we go. And we promise we won't trash on it quite so hard. But to be fair, we trashed on it on Caretaker. We gave it worse reviews, so I think we've been quite
always
fair.
on both barrels,
but
we're
way better than Caretaker.
Yeah,
way better.
Starshy, thank you for joining us. We will be back soon with our next Star Trek, which we're going to decide. I think we're going to go on to do Discovery, aren't we? I think we decided.
I'd like to do.
Yeah, let's do that.
Wait a minute, hold on. Why haven't we done the Man Trap yet? Why haven't we done the fake Star Trek TOS pilot?
We did the real one. We're getting the real one.
No, maybe we did the fake one.
Maybe we do where no one has gone before?
Which pilot do you want? We could be here doing pilots for years and years.
Man Trap is the first Star Trek that aired.
Maybe
Respect the chronology.
Maybe we'll talk to our subs about that.
You're perpetrating a real temporal Cold War right now by trying to erase the Man Trap from the continuity of Star Trek.
Listen, I celebrate Star Trek Day the same as everyone on the airing date of the Man Trap, so I am with you on that one. But anyway, from everyone here, we will be back very soon. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel, and if you have not subscribed to our Twitch channel, go and do that, and you can get some goodies on our Discord channel. So from our guys, live long and prosper, and hopefully we will reach this Broken Bow once again. Ta-ra!